and more on this landmark case. Joining me now is Supreme Court Attorney Corey Biazzo. Thank you very much for being here. It is a huge day. Let's talk about the stakes of this case as you see it. Obviously, history is about to be made with the president just even sitting in this courtroom.
Certainly, and thank you for having me today, Laura.
So let's talk about those stakes. Let's see what you think about where we're at, what's at stake, and we know we're not going to have a decision today. But what do you think of where we are so far?
Yeah, so I would say this is an interesting case. Really, while it's about immigration, the primary issue is about limits on executive authority. In this case, President Trump issued an executive order on day one of returning to office, trying to narrow birthright citizenship as interpreted by the 14th Amendment, narrower than the Supreme Court determined it is in 1898. The case is really about whether the president can or cannot nullify federal law and Supreme Court interpretation of the Constitution solely by executive order.
Is there merit to the Trump administration's argument as you see it? And I'm just curious, too, about the people that you speak to in your legal circles, what people are making of it, of the argument.
Yeah, I mean, I think the process is out of order here. The court can certainly reinterpret precedent, but to do that, we have to have a proper vehicle. And the president issuing a blatantly unconstitutional executive order is not the right way to do that.
And why not? Why can't it be different in that way? Tell me what order it should be in.
Well, basically, we have three branches of government. The executive branch is to enforce the law, the courts interpret the law, and the legislature makes the law. So in this situation, the 14th Amendment was ratified by Congress after the Civil War. It's been interpreted by the Supreme Court in 1898. In order for that case to come up, there has to be a valid judicial reason. And the executive simply cannot mandate that the court hear this decision. If any president can issue an executive order and contrast the Constitution to trigger reinterpretation, then every president moving forward will have that power.
Right. I mean, like we said, this is a historic moment because President Trump is actually planning to be in the room today to hear the arguments. And you see here on our screen, this is President Trump leaving the White House with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. He's set to arrive moments ago that happened. We're expecting him to show up at the Supreme Court any moment now. How does his presence influence the outcome of the hearings, or will it? And which judges do you think you're going to be watching out for as we move through this process today?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's definitely unprecedented for a president to show up at oral arguments. I mean, he certainly is a party to the case. So, I guess he is technically entitled to be there. However, I don't see his presence impacting anything of the substantive arguments. I just don't see an impact. As far as justices to watch for, I would say watch out for the conservative majority, as I'm sure everyone is aware. I don't see this case getting very far for the president.
Other countries have birthright citizenship similar to the U.S. as we take a look around the world. And if the Supreme Court does rule in Trump's favor, which it sounds like, I'm not sure if we're going to get there, but if that were to happen, what ripple effect do you see that happening as we look at other countries that have this?
I think domestically, hundreds of thousands of people would be impacted. I think as far as implementing new policy, I think it would create all kinds of chaos. This country has relied on this interpretation of the 14th Amendment since 1898. So it'd be very destructive. I can't even imagine.
Okay.
I just don't see it happening, though, based on the precedent. Like I said, this is procedurally improper, the way that we're getting here today.
All right, and let's look at our screen together. Let's walk our viewers through this. We're watching the president's motorcade move in tandem right now, going from the White House to the Supreme Court. Obviously, I've covered Trump being at court, and this is the tradition of what we see, all of these different vehicles showing up at the Supreme Court. And we're talking about the justices as well. So you just said we want to be watching out, and for you're going to be looking at the conservative justices on this. Let's talk about who is going to be listening to these arguments and eventually making the decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, we're looking at issues of maintaining what's called stare decisis, which is maintaining prior decisions of the courts. That's kind of been a hot topic during this administration of how much the courts can reinterpret precedent. They certainly have the right to do that. Like I said earlier, this is not the proper vehicle.
Right.
I can't. I don't see any other issues like this happening. I mean, it's kind of like the tariffs case, right? The president attempted to implement international tariffs solely by executive order. It's out of process. You want to change the Constitution? We have a procedure in the Constitution to change it. We simply can't change it by executive fiat if the executive disagrees with it.
Okay, but it's also not the first time that birthright citizenship is being considered in court, right? So this has been talked about for a long time, and it is really we just want to take a beat for a second because it is such a historic moment with the president on his way to the Supreme Court. As we watch the motorcade arrive and security get in position, we're getting ready for this to get underway. And I asked you about what justices you were going to be looking out for. You mentioned that you're going to be keeping an eye on conservative justices. But as we take a look at the security around this, and Trump it's really interesting that Trump has spent so much time going to courtrooms, in these last few years. I'm just wondering what your read is on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to judge too much, but if I were representing the president, I would advise against his presence. I think that it can be interpreted as an attempt to, possibly intimidate the justices. He's sitting there scowling at them as they're conducting oral argument. I just don't see it working in his favor. There's no substance to that can be considered. And the justices, if they're doing their job properly, his presence there or not should mean nothing.
Right. And he did mention in the Oval yesterday, he was talking about the fact that he wants to be there. He's been hearing about these arguments for so long that he just wants to see the process play out for himself. So that's why he says he's going. We'll see how it plays out together right here on NewsNation. U.S. Supreme Court Attorney Corey Biazzo, I want to thank you very much for your time.